but the grace of God that was with me. My partner in leadership was the unearned, unearnable, unmerited, wonderful favor of living, serving power. Now, Paul is not satisfied to say this only once. He actually says it twice. So if you come to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, you have another statement that I really want to show you. I'm excited to show this to you because it is so critical for you to understand this. It's amazing how Paul was treated, particularly by the Corinthians. He brought the gospel to them. He led them to the Lord. He established the church. He taught them, but they didn't like his style. You know, he didn't have a really smooth style. He wasn't a real first century orator. And the Greeks in Corinth, and it was very much a Greek city, the church had the values of the city. It had not been transformed. And so their values were great delivery, wonderful words. And they expected Paul to be this grand communicator. And when he wasn't, they didn't value him. They didn't respect him. You know, Paul made a decision. He describes it in 1 Corinthians. He said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let a method get in the way of my message. My method is going to fit my message. My message is about the cross. And you cannot take a cross with all of its ugliness. You cannot take a cross with the blood and the screams and the shouts that surrounded it. You cannot take a cross that sat on the back of the Son of God who became the Son of Man. And you cannot dress it up in Greek or oratory. I'm not going to do that. And because of that, the Corinthians didn't really have value for him, and they didn't respect his authority. And so he's in a place in 2 Corinthians when he's defending his authority. And in fact, he starts his defense. I love the way he starts his defense. 2 Corinthians 10:1. By the meekness and gentleness of Christ, I appeal to you. By the submissive spirit and the gentleness of Christ, I will show you my authority. This is so great that his authority comes through his meekness. Learn of me, he said, you who are tired. For I am meek and lowly of heart, and my burden is light. I am submitted to my Father. I am gentle. I am humble. I will not put heavy burdens on you. I will carry the weight. And so Paul defends his authority and begins to describe an experience that he had. He doesn't really quite say it was his because it was so unbelievable. He was caught up into the very presence of God at one point in time, and God brought him into his presence and showed Paul things he could not even begin to talk about, at least. He could remember, but he wasn't going to talk about them. And as Paul had that experience, he says, keep me from becoming proud, conceited, lifted up. God sent a thorn in my flesh. Great debate about the thorn in the flesh of Paul. I take it to be a physical illness of some kind, perhaps a disfiguring illness. There were some who thought that perhaps he had a particular kind of eye disease that just made his eyes bulge and hampered his sight, and he was not really very attractive to see. Kind of interesting, isn't it? The Corinthians wanted a classic Greek orator, and here they got this kind of little Jewish guy with weird eyes and the message of the cross. So he says 3 times, I pleaded with the Lord, take it away, take it away. But in verse 9, the Lord responded, my grace is sufficient for you. My grace has the resource, and my grace is adequate for you. It's really part of the concept that's in view here. My grace is adequate for you. What you can't do, my grace can do. And I want you to see what he says next. For my power is made perfect, complete, total in weakness. I want you to see two words that are equated. My grace is sufficient. Why? Because my power is made complete, total in your weakness. Do you see what he's saying? He's saying that grace is power, that grace brings power, that grace is enablement, that grace is as much and as significant as it is as saving grace. It's also empowering resource. It's also an enabling resource. It also enables you as a leader to do what you could never do on your own. And that's what Paul says. So therefore, I will most gladly boast in my weakness. I'm not going to try to get rid of this weakness. So you want a big, handsome Greek orator and you've got me instead with my bulging eyes? Yes, because God's power is made complete in my weakness. Do you see this, my friends? Do you understand that in your fear, the very things you're trying to hide, your inadequacy, your vulnerability, your struggles, do you see that those very things are the avenues of access to God's power? Do you see that? Give it up. Give up trying to prove yourself. Give up trying to show everybody how adequate you are. Give up trying to be superior. You're wasting your time. It's not important. Turn to God. Tell him, I want the mortar of your grace to hold my life together. I want to see your empowering grace working to make me adequate. Redeem my inadequacy through your grace. Dear Lord, show yourself through me. You'll never believe what God will do when you pray that prayer.